Hello, everyone. I'm Alicia Acuna, along with David Webb, Anita Vogel, and Dr. Mark Siegel. And this is the Big Weekend Show. We begin with a Fox News alert. We are learning more details about Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin and what could have radicalized him, as the FBI tells Fox News that 22-year-old suspect Tyler Robinson was in a romantic relationship and living with his transgender partner in Utah. This could explain why the last question Charlie was asked was about transgender mass shooters.
For the last 10 years?
Too many.
It's 5. Okay, now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. You know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
The roommate is cooperating with law enforcement after Robinson allegedly messaged them following Charlie Kirk's assassination, and video shows the suspect fleeing the scene after the shooting, which helped authorities find the rifle he used, along with bullet casings etched with anti-fascist and possibly pro-transgender messages, giving some insight into what motivated the murder. Attorney and former NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow is still live from outside the jail where the suspect is being held, and former Special FBI Agent Nicole Parker also joins us for tonight's Big Close-Up. Nicole, thank you so much for being here. We just have so much on the table here. So we're just getting this new details regarding the reporting from Fox News on the transgender partner of the suspect. In your mind as an investigator, how does this play into the investigation going forward and the case before prosecutors?
I think this is very big in the investigation. I think it plays a very critical role. And as we spoke about in your introduction, I would like to understand the questioning to Charlie Kirk right before he was assassinated. Is it a coincidence that it had to do with transgender? And I would like to know the relationship between the individual asking the question and the shooter. I would also like to point out that the roommate at this point is being highly cooperative. Do you wonder why? I certainly don't, because they know that everything is on the line right now, because they could look into potential conspiracy charges if they look back into, did this individual, the roommate, know about it leading up to, the assassination? At this point, I believe that the roommate's saying, I did not know anything about it. I did not know anything prior to the offense. But let's leave that up to the investigators and see what they say. But the fact that the boyfriend slash roommate slash partner is, transitioning, and the transgender movement just seems to be extremely problematic these days. And many of the mass shootings that we're seeing in this instance, it was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But one important thing that we cannot underestimate are those shell casings. It was an odd question that I had in my mind when this first happened, but I wondered, did the shooter police his brass? Did he leave the casings before we even knew that there were engravings on them? And sure enough, there's engravings, and that will be very key to investigators. What is written on that, those engravings and the shell casings, the rounds that were unused, that were found with the weapon, that is so important. And again, we're seeing this anti-fascist statements. Also a strong link to video games, online video games. And I think something of the generation, these individuals are around 22 years old. This is something that is very common for them, gaming. And we see in the FBI and in many investigations, a lot of these people get involved in this fantasy world, and they're in these video games, playing these games, and then it turns into a reality. And that, deciphering between the fantasy world and the reality, that is something that they will definitely be looking into from a behavioral analysis perspective. But the motive, and determining that motive, seeing those shell casings, I believe that this individual, this shooter, wanted to make a very, very clear message. And as we're seeing the link to the roommate and their transgender transitioning, things are definitely, pieces of the puzzle are coming together for investigators.
Yeah, Paul, it's Anita Vogel. Like Nicole said, there is so much new information coming in now. More dots are being connected. My question to you is, do you know whether authorities are questioning the student or the person in attendance who asked those questions about transgender violence? And is there any thinking that that person could have something to do with this? Any connection at all?
I haven't heard anything like that, but I can absolutely assure you that they have located and question that person. That person is named. I've seen it in media reports. There's absolutely no way they would not have chased that lead down to see if there was anything to it. My gut tells me, and this is just, a ballpark attempt here, but I would argue that it's unlikely. That would be awfully contrived, awfully obvious, and I think we would already know, because I think that person would be under arrest, taken into custody, and I don't think that that would be something we wouldn't be hearing about. So I doubt very much that the questioner is involved. You never know. But what I do think is that this development relative to the partner could be important just for fleshing out the case. Aside from the motive and linking to the engravings and the things like that, if this person is cooperative, then you're going to get a whole window into the world of the perpetrator that you wouldn't even get by dumping phones, computers, and social media. You're going to get a real close-up look at what was going on with the accused. And you might even have some leverage here if, in fact, the partner is chargeable. So I am sure that they are looking very hard at the partner and seeing which way to go with it.
You know, Nicole, this is David Webb, and the FBI has the tools to track cell phones. They can pull even the brain from a vehicle, where it's any navigation, all of that and more. And on a wider scale, wouldn't they, and to what extent would they look at everything from, could he have gone to shooting ranges? Did he cross any state line? Anything like that, to follow that path. And it kind of goes to what Paul just said about dumping the phones, dumping the data of all these people to find any intersecting points. And of course, again, did he just take the luckiest shot ever of his life, or did he practice, and where did he do this?
That's an excellent question, and I have no doubt in my mind that the FBI, local, state, law enforcement is looking into that, and they will track his pattern of life. And that's what we typically do. When a suspect is identified, that's when the real investigation begins. Obviously in this instance, it was a manhunt. The top priority is getting them into custody for the safety of the community, and to know that there is someone in custody. Once that happens, the tempo of the investigation slows down drastically, and they start going through every single thing with a fine-tooth comb. And they're developing a full profile of this individual, not just what happened that day. They're going to back this thing up, I wouldn't be surprised, for months, even a year, determining its pattern of life. And you mentioned a very good point, David. The infotainment systems and vehicles, that is a treasure trove of information. As we know, the vehicle was seen at the family's home. Law enforcement is looking through that like every single move. Depending on the make and model of the car, you can determine maps, where they went. I'm not going to reveal all of the FBI's investigative techniques, but they can certainly backtrack where this person had potentially been, who they'd been in contact with. That is an excellent question, and that is always a treasure trove of information for the FBI. And did they have, were they going to shooting ranges? How long were they doing that? Who had they been interacting with? And this is when good old-fashioned policing also comes into play. Advanced technology is important, but it's also conducting interviews. Every single person in his immediate circle of influence and people that he knew, they will all be interviewed.
Nicole, I have a quick follow-up. It's Dr. Siegel. Microanalysis, forensics. You brought up the question earlier about whether the partner was transitioning. Are they going to be able to get into all of that? Is there going to be a big political backlash if they start going down that road? Obviously, it might play a role here.
In my opinion, there should be no politics on the table in this. I don't really care if it's a political backlash, what it might be. The facts are the facts. And when you're doing a real investigation in law enforcement, you follow the evidence no matter what it is. And if it's politically offensive to someone, that's not what law enforcement is concerned about. They're concerned about finding the facts, finding the evidence, finding the truth, and serving justice. I can tell you just this afternoon, I was in contact with one of the witnesses who was within 10 yards of Charlie Kirk when this happened in Utah. His father had contacted me immediately after it happened. I was live on Fox, and I ended up speaking to the son. And his number one concern right now is initially they're shocked. They're terrified, they're shocked. But now it's kind of sunk in. They want justice. Not only do we need justice for Charlie Kirk and his wife and his children, we need justice for the witnesses, for the other victims that live with this trauma, and we need justice for the American people. This cannot be tolerated. And I know that right now it's being charged on a local level. I wouldn't be surprised if the feds do come in and try to charge it federally, not because they don't think the locals can charge it and it's not a solid case. It is absolutely a solid case. There's no question about that. And Utah has the death penalty. So that's not an issue in this case. I think it's more as a deterrent. You show these criminals, if you do this, you will be held accountable on every single level, and you can run, but you cannot hide. And I think it's also important to note that the suspect, his father, I wouldn't be shocked if his father was watching Fox News or another news network, and that's where he saw the images of his own son. How difficult would that be to turn in a parent? But I remember being on Fox and saying, you know what? It's the integrity. You've got to do the right thing. I don't care if it's your brother, nephew, son. And that's what that father did. When he told his son, you need to turn yourself in, the son said, I would rather kill myself. Well, you know what? Justice will be served. Death penalty is on the table. And that's what it's all about at this point.
Well, and we do know that those photos that were put out by law enforcement were critical to that family coming forward and the father recognizing his son. Nicole Parker, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Paul Morrow will stay with us throughout the hour.